All right, so today we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating K-pop story that kind of by accident turned into this incredible case study on crisis communication. It's all about good intentions, but also these wild, unintended consequences and the high-stakes game of knowing when to speak up and maybe, just maybe, when to stay quiet.
And really, it all comes down to this one question. Can issuing a formal, well-meaning statement actually pour gasoline on a fire? That's exactly what we're going to explore, using G-Dragon's recent Mama Awards performance and his agency's attempt to handle the online reaction.
So to really get how this thing blew up, we've got to rewind. Let's go back to the very beginning, to the moment that first lit the fuse.
Okay, so it all kicks off right here. G-Dragon hits the stage at the 2025 Mama Awards. But this time, instead of just universal praise, the performance immediately splits the room. You've got some pretty intense debates firing up online. But here's the thing you have to remember. At this point, it's a small fire. It's mostly contained to people who are actually watching the show.
And of course, this growing online chatter is what makes G-Dragon's agency, Galaxy Corporation, decide they need to step in. They felt they had to clear the air, get control of the story before it really got away from them.
So you can see the sequence of events. You have the performance itself, which pretty quickly leads to this heated online debate. And then, right as that conversation is really picking up steam, the agency makes its move. On December 1st, they drop an official statement to address what people were saying.
And here is the absolute core of their explanation. They say the performance that everyone saw, well, that wasn't the original plan. It was actually a last-minute change. The initial idea was this big, flashy show with all the choreography and bells and whistles. What we got instead was something much more toned down, much more sober.
So of course, the big question is why? Why change everything at the last second? Well, the agency said that G-Dragon had just learned about a really tragic, deadly fire in Hong Kong, and out of respect for the victims, he decided to completely change his performance. And in their statement, they really wanted to hammer this point home, that this wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate choice. A choice meant to show genuine sympathy and to offer comfort. I mean, on the surface, that sounds like a really honorable and thoughtful thing to do, right? Well, this is where the whole story takes a very, very sharp turn, because that explanation, which was meant to put out the debate, ended up acting like pure accelerant. And this is the disconnect. It's huge. The agency's goal was super simple: protect their artists from nasty online comments. But what actually happened was the complete opposite. The statement didn't quiet things down. It was like a giant megaphone, suddenly getting the attention of people who had no idea this was even a thing.
And I mean, look no further than this. This is the proof. Comments just like this started popping up everywhere. This person is literally saying they didn't even notice a problem until the agency said something. But now, with this new context, they're looking back at the performance and seeing it in a totally negative light, calling it insincere. For a lot of people, the explanation didn't feel like a genuine reason. It felt like an excuse made up after the fact for a performance they thought was just kind of meh. And that changed everything.
And it wasn't just the public either. You had industry insiders weighing in, with one person pretty much saying that this response shows a real lack of experience. Basically, that Galaxy Corporation still has a lot to learn about how to handle the heat in the entertainment world.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? This whole chain reaction gives us a really powerful real-world lesson in the very tricky art of crisis PR.
What happened here is a textbook example of something called the amplification effect. It's that classic situation where you try to put out a tiny little fire, but in doing so, you basically send up a giant smoke signal for everyone to come over and look, turning it into an absolute bonfire.
So let's just break down the anatomy of how this whole thing backfired. Step 1, you get a spark, a pretty contained debate. Step 2, the official response comes out to clarify and defend, but Step 3, that response acts like a massive spotlight, drawing way more attention than the original issue ever had. And finally, Step 4, this new, bigger audience piles on with their own criticisms, and the whole thing just spirals.
And all of this leaves us with a really critical question, not just for K-pop agencies, but for any kind of public communication, really. By trying to explain every last detail, did the agency end up creating a much, much bigger problem? It really makes you wonder, in this incredibly noisy world of public relations, when is the most powerful move you can make? To just say nothing at all?